What happens when an older woman catches her sister-in-law in bed with her husband, a week before the divorce? She didn't make a scene. She just smiled and started acting in a way that no one in the family expected how it would turn out. This isn't just a story about divorce. It's a story about you, a woman in her 60s, making an apple cinnamon pie, sticking a toothpick in it to see if the center is cooked through, and then you walk out on the porch, and you notice your sister-in-law getting out of your husband's car, buttoning her shirt. And you realize, either you're imagining things, or you're standing in the midst of your own tragicomedy. My name is Loretta. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. And according to my family albums, I was a happy woman. Until I was wiped on the doormat, literally and figuratively. It all started when I, naive idiot, decided to get the whole family together for Sunday dinner. I wanted to remind them that we were more than just housemates. I pulled out the very set I'd been saving since our first anniversary. I ironed the tablecloth. I bought the wine that Thomas loved in the 80s. I even baked a cake from my mom's recipe. The one with the lattice of pastry and the secret of grated nutmeg. And you know who came first? Rachel, my sister-in-law. In a short dress and a look on her face like she owned the place. I gave her a silly motherly smile and offered her a warm pie. And she said, "Oh, is it that cinnamon one again? We have an intolerance, Loretta. Don't you remember?" And she took a sip of her lemon detox. I didn't answer. I just put the pie away, along with the last vestiges of self-esteem. Then Thomas came. My husband. 42 years of marriage, in case anyone was wondering. He kissed Rachel on the cheek too long, too close, and said Michael, our son, would be late. Then he opened a bottle of wine and poured her one. What about me? He offered me warm water. I thought you said you had blood pressure. That's nice, isn't it? All night I watched them look at each other. Her hand lingering on his shoulder. How he laughed at her jokes, the ones he once thought were stupid. And then I noticed her earrings. They were my earrings. Gold. From the same jewelry box I kept in my bedroom. She said she took them to try on. And Thomas added, "Loretta, don't be an old bore. You don't use them anyway." That's when I realized I wasn't just old. I was transparent. But I could still cook. And remember. And observe. And most of all, I could wait. And I waited. The next day, I decided to rearrange the furniture. Yes, the furniture. Because, when things get out of control, at least you can move your chair to a place where it doesn't hurt so much to breathe. I moved my chair to the window where I used to watch Michael play ball. Now instead of a boy, it's his grown wife, who hangs on my husband like sticky gum on a sole. Michael, by the way, didn't show up. He got held up at work, had meetings, or was just tired. The son I'd carried, breastfed, taught how to make tea for grandma, was now communicating with me via 9-second voicemails. And always on the run. "Mom, I'll catch up with you later. Mom, I'm busy. Mom, not now." And then there was Saturday. The one that doesn't get out of your head, even after 100 cups of valerian. I woke up early. The heat was as stifling as a cheap wool coat. I went down to the kitchen and saw that the coffee machine was running. Only I wasn't in the kitchen. I wasn't going to spy. I just walked over. And then I heard it. Her voice. Laughter. And then his voice. And that low, lazy tone in which he hadn't spoken to me in 15 years. They were in the bathroom. Together. I left quietly. No tears. No hysterics. I just sat on the porch and watched the ants carry the crumbs from last night's cookies. And I thought, there they were, the team. Small, focused, cohesive. Unlike our family. Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I throw my stuff out, slam the door, call my son? Because I'm Loretta. I don't need a scene. I need the truth. And the truth like silence. And paperwork. That same day I found our old lawyer. Gray-haired, husky voice, but a memory like a shark. He wasn't surprised. He just nodded and said, "Are you ready?" And I replied, "Ready is an understatement." I printed out everything. Screenshots of correspondence, surveillance logs. Yes, Rachel, you forgot about that little camera on Loretto. Receipts of Thomas's suspicious spending, which for some reason were coming from my card. When I got home, there was music playing in the house. They were cooking dinner. For friends. Without me. My table. My dishes. My candles. And even my signature pear salad, the recipe for which I never gave to anyone. They thought I was gone. Oh well. Close call. I don't know how they took my silence. I suppose they took it as weakness, as they always do. Thomas was convinced I was incapable of anything but baking a pie and writing a check on time. And Rachel. She thought I was retired not only in age but in intelligence. But I knew there was a time for everything. I made breakfast: scrambled eggs, fried bacon, toast. I put it all on the table, set out 3 cups. They were the only ones who showed up. Michael was gone again, unless, of course, a grown man has better things to do than mother. Breakfast is a classic, Thomas said. You, Loretta, are a master at making things cozy. Really, it's probably the only thing you have left, Rachel added. I laughed. Not loudly, quietly, almost affectionately. But I was already storming inside. I made myself some tea. I sat down across from her. You think you've won, don't you? Rachel grinned. I think you're just not at the age to understand all this. Oh girl, I said. I'm at an age where you're not afraid to call things by their proper names anymore. Even if they stink. I got up. And I left. Without slamming the door. Just left her with the kettle and the silence. I went to the notary that day. I rewrote the will. I rewrote the deeds to the land. Everything I could. Everything I wanted. I sat at the window for a long time until the lights went out downstairs. The whole house fell into slumber like an illusion of safety, and I into my resolve. The next morning I wrote a letter. Not in the spirit of apology. Not I'm sorry or I forgive you. No. I wrote, I am no longer an observer. I canceled the transfers to Michael. I stopped the power of attorney to Thomas. Money isn't revenge. It's freedom. I finally had it back. And when Rachel walked in without knocking, I was already sitting there with a cup of coffee. What's going on? Restoring order, I said. You like order, don't you? I'm Loretta. I'm the person you underestimated. And from now on I play by my own rules. What happened next changed everything. Subscribe and stay. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. I don't know why I naively thought that after I showed them the documents and showed them that I had everything under control, they would at least try to feign shame. Or conscience. Or at the very least common sense. But apparently I overestimated not only my family, but also the genre of this tragicomedy. It wasn't a drama. It was a farce. The morning after my silent coup, as I now call it, the house smelled of rosemary and smugness. Rachel was flaunting my apron in the kitchen again. Thomas was frying pancakes he hadn't made since Bush Sr. They laughed. They chatted. As if nothing had happened. As if I were not the mistress of this house, but a sad ghost that frightens with its invisibility. I came in as I should, with dignity. With my hair combed, wearing the shirt Thomas had once bought me for Thanksgiving. I wonder if he even remembers the color. I don't think so. He'd barely remembered my name when he'd introduced me to his coworkers at the corporate party. This is my wife. It was like he'd forgotten the name of the woman who'd been washing his socks for 40 years. I sat down at the table, poured myself a cup of coffee. Too strong. Bitter. Just right. Michael and I are thinking of doing the guest house, Rachel said with the tone of voice one usually uses to pronounce a sentence. There's a lot of space, and it might be more convenient for you to move in while we renovate. I almost choked. I'm sorry, what? You're suggesting that I, the owner of this house, move into the annex? Rachel shrugged. We just want to make things easier for everyone. You and me. There'll be more space. Less stress. Yeah, less stress. Especially if you take away the one who remembers too much. How convenient, I said. Are you suggesting I leave my own home so you can be free to have family events there? Loretta, Thomas interjected. Don't start. It's just a suggestion. We're not kicking you out. No, of course not. They're just gently escorting you out. With a smile. With orange juice. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I realized there was no point in talking now. After breakfast, I went out into the garden. I looked at the tree I'd planted with Michael when he was 7. He had tiptoed around the shovel and I had shown him where to dig. Now all that was left of that tree was a shadow, and the bitterness that he had long forgotten who watered that tree. I pulled out my phone and texted him, "Come by tonight. We need to talk." The reply came 4 hours later. Not sure. A lot of work. What's it about? What are we talking about, Michael? It could be about your wife sleeping with your father, and you grabbing your headphones and hiding in your phone. But I didn't write that. I just erased the message and went into the kitchen. Rachel was in there sorting through my drawers. I'm just looking for a place for our spices, she said. We have a lot of them and yours are irrelevant. That's fine, I replied. I too thought my spices were out of date, especially coriander from 1996. And it turns out to be a great remedy for hypocrisy. But the real kicker was the evening. Michael showed up, wearing the shirt I'd given him for Christmas. That's funny. He didn't even realize it was the same shirt. Mom, I don't understand why you're so tense. We're just offering a temporary solution. You call this temporary? You know what's temporary? Lovers. A home, son, a home is forever. It's all in your head. Dad's just friends with Rachel. You're fixated. If I was obsessing, I'd bury them both under the very tree we planted. But no. I just decided I wasn't going to say anything anymore. He left, slamming the door, like a boy who didn't get his toy. And I stayed. Not victorious, but in my place. The next day, I noticed that the curtains had been removed from my bedroom. They were old, Rachel explained. I ordered new ones. Modern. Light-colored. Light-colored, yeah. So I couldn't even hide from their smiles. In the evening, Thomas started talking about the bills. We should talk about how to optimize our expenses, he began over dinner. You don't have a steady income anymore. And heating is expensive. Do you want me to pay rent on my house? We all have to participate, Rachel interjected. It's fair. The house is big, you're alone, it's inefficient. What's next? You're gonna rent out my bathroom by the hour? I didn't sleep that night. I wondered how I could be so blind. 40 years together. I raised a child, comforted my husband, pulled everything while he found himself. And now he's found it, in the body of his own daughter-in-law. I wasn't broken, but I'd been wiped clean. I turned on my laptop. I looked at houses. Small ones. One story. With a garden. I'm not losing. I'm on the offensive. I put on my blue coat. The one Thomas called grandma's because it makes you look too old. That's fine. Let them know what old age looks like when you can't tell it to. I went to City Hall. I filed the paperwork to reissue the account. And then I went to the IRS. Yeah, it's all legal. When I got back, I found Rachel in my office. You were going through my papers? I was just looking for my passport. You're a bad liar. Too pathetic, like an actress on a cheap soap opera. If you think you can scare me. Scare you? Girl, I gave birth to a man you're trying to control. You think you can scare me? I made a deal with a realtor. I found a house. A small one with a red door. It smelled like bread and something warm. At dinner, they talked about vacations, renovations, their new page. And I looked at them as if they were characters in a play who didn't even realize that the scene had already changed. Late in the evening, I sat by the window again. In my lap was an old notebook. In it were recipes, childhood drawings, notes from my youth. Everything I'd tried to preserve while others had scrubbed me out of history. I ripped out one page. I wrote on it, "This is my home, but not my hell." And I taped it to the mirror in the hallway. Let them see it. I'm a woman, a mother, a wife, and now a judge. And when I close that door, it won't close behind me, it will close behind them. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Subscribe now to see the hero put everyone in their place. The day has come. The day when you realize that you're either going to close that door nicely, or you're going to be kicked out of it in your slippers and with the phrase, "Well, you wanted to make it easy." I woke up before everyone else. Not because I hadn't slept, but because sleeping with this weight on my chest was like lying under a slab of concrete. Except now I wasn't lying down anymore. I was standing. And not just standing, I was going to step forward. My new home was ready. I had everything signed, all the transfers transferred, I had all the keys. The red door shone like a flag of freedom. A small garden with rosemary, an old bench under a maple tree. It was modest but real. Unlike all the tinsel that Thomas and Rachel had turned my house into. I pulled myself together. One last look around the bedroom. I ran my hand over the windowsill one last time. Michael with a fever, Thomas with a hangover, me with milk and sleep deprivation. And now only dust and indifference. I didn't bring any curtains or bedding. Just a box of photo albums, a letter from my mom, and a kitchen knife, not because of paranoia, but because it cut the right way. Everything else they could keep. Let them cut bread on my board. Let them live on the wreckage. I went downstairs. In the kitchen, Rachel was frying an omelet. We're having company tonight, she tossed over her shoulder. There's going to be a party. We were thinking about a barbecue. I hope you don't mind? I set the box on the floor. Do you mind? Oh no, darling. I'm a free woman. I don't care anymore. What's that supposed to mean? I took out an envelope. Nice thick stamped. It means you have 2 weeks to move out. The house is for sale. The whole thing. Including the garage, the workshop, and the guest room. Thomas walked in just in time to hear the last words. What the hell? It's all signed. It's all signed. And no, Thomas, you don't have veto power. You had the right to choose. But you chose my shadow. They were both silent. Only Rachel had a spatula smoking in her hand, and I almost hoped she'd use it. There would have been at least a spark of drama. But no. Just anger and surprise. You can't just do that, can you? She mumbled. I can. And I did. I turned around, picked up the box. I'm not leaving because I lost. I'm leaving because I won. And I walked out. Not loudly. Not in tears. Just with the feeling that this is finally my stage. The new house smelled like apples. Not the ones in the supermarket window, but real ones, with a slight sourness and the smell of earth. I opened the window and breathed in. For the first time in many months. The move was quick. Packing into 2 suitcases and a box was easier than I thought it would be. When you've been taught for years that everything important is stuff, you suddenly realize that the most valuable thing is space. Space where no one interrupts you half-heartedly. I was making coffee. I put a little more than I needed because I can. I listened to the radio where the announcer was talking about the rainstorms on the coast. I was sitting in a chair with a blanket, not expecting someone to come in and say, Mom, are you busy? And then the doorbell rang. There was Michael. He was holding a container of something hot. His face was tired. T-shirt stretched out. The same kid who once wore dinosaur pajamas. Hi, Mom, he said. I just wanted to see how you were. I didn't say anything. I counted to 5. Then I opened the door wider. Come on in. Let me tell you right off the bat, I don't have a filter, son. If you're here for affection, go to Rachel's. He put the food on the table. We broke up. I didn't answer. Just nodded. There was no celebration inside. Only sadness that he had come when the house was already closed. I realized it too late. Let her ruin everything. You let yourself be silent. That's worse. He lowered his eyes. Dad's gone. Temporarily, he says. But I don't think he knows where he's going. That's great. Less people, more air. We had a cup of coffee. I didn't stroke his arm. He didn't ask if I'd forgive him. It was the dialogue of 2 adults finally coming out of the theater of illusions. When he left, I stood on the porch for a long time. And then I smiled. I didn't know how this chapter would end. But I did know that I was writing it now. The next day, I went out to the garden. Secateur in one hand, a mug of tea in the other. I cut away the dry branches as if I were cutting away the past. No hysterics. Just quiet, methodical, precise. A neighbor came over. 60 years old, with pink gloves and a face that said it all without words. You new here? Uh-huh. A displaced refugee from a family disaster zone. There's half a block of them here. Welcome. If you don't talk about husbands, I'm all yours. That night I opened that box. Photos. Letters. A note from Michael when he was in 1st grade. Mom, you're the best cook ever. I grinned. Then I pulled out a notebook and wrote. A woman doesn't get weaker with age. She gets quieter. But just because you can't hear her doesn't mean she's gone. It means you'll soon realize who you've lost. I put it in an envelope. And I sent it. No address. Just into the wind. Let it carry. Maybe it'll reach those who think mothers don't cry when they're betrayed. I don't cry anymore. I'm living. And if anyone asks me again how I decided to leave, I'll tell them simply. I was tired of being a piece of furniture in a house I built myself. Now I am the house and the foundation. A week later I returned not to the house but to the neighborhood. On business. I was walking past an old supermarket and saw Thomas. He was standing by a shelf of frozen dinners alone, with a kind of emptiness in his eyes. He didn't notice me. Or pretended to. Or maybe he didn't dare approach me. And I just walked on by. For the first time without pain. No reproach. No desire to prove anything. He's an episode now. Not a hero. Not even an antagonist. Just a detail in a book I'm no longer reading. I bought myself a bouquet on the way back. Not because it was a holiday, but because I finally remembered that I could please myself just for fun. In the evening I lit candles. I covered myself with a blanket. I looked at my kitchen, not big, not fancy, but my own. And I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt not just loneliness but silence. Real silence. No background judgment. Without the clatter of footsteps behind which lies lurk. I'm Loretta. I built a house. I stood up to betrayal. I walked away without falling. And most importantly, I showed up again. And the rest? Let it be in the past. I'm not